Welcome to Foreign Correspondents. I'm Min San-hee. Winter is right around the corner here in Korea, but despite the chilly conditions, our foreign journalists remain committed to bringing you the latest stories. Good to have you with us.
Nice to be back again.
We are indoors with this edition of Foreign Correspondents. We are at the Young Art Center in Gwangju, Gyeonggi Province. Marcus, what are some of the stories you covered this week?
I covered the Choi Soon-sil story this week, the reception of Choi Soon-sil, her coming back to Korea. And it turns out there's also a Danish angle to the story that's interesting to our readers. So Choi Soon-sil's daughter has a horse that's stabled in a small city in Denmark.
Oh,
so I've been looking into that.
I see, and it's an issue that the rest of you have also been covering, right?
Yeah, certainly. I was at the prosecutor's office the other day for Choi Soon-sil being questioned when she came in for questioning and witnessed quite a media scrum there. Hundreds of journalists, 20 media trucks, South Korean media trucks, helicopters overhead, and we were talking about this on the way here, the sort of media scrum that she had to go through when she was entered the prosecutor's office, maybe being a bit dangerous. I think Elise might have something to say about that.
It was astounding to me that the prosecutors themselves didn't find a way to give her a back entrance, a garage entrance, or at least cordon off the path that she was going to walk such that she wouldn't be mobbed in the way that she was. So obviously I understand that she's the villain in this story right now, but she deserved to be able to sort of be treated decently when she was walking through a crowd.
Right, well, it's an issue that's still developing. November 8th this year marks Election Day in the United States. Voters will select presidential electors who in turn will vote for a president through the Electoral College. In this edition of Foreign Correspondents, we delve into America's presidential race.
Election fever is gripping the United States.
First time in our nation's history that a woman will be a major party's nominee.
Americanism, not globalism, will be our credo.
Reflecting the intensity of the race, the viewership for the first presidential debate reached 84 million. During the first Clinton-Trump debate, over 17 million tweets were exchanged from 2.7 million Twitter accounts, further evidence of the skyrocketing interest from the American public. And this momentum is expected to carry over to November 8th, when people head to the polls. The US has an indirect election process for its presidential election. Voters cast their ballots for designated electors from the respective states who in turn vote for the president. The number of electors depends on the state's population, and there are a total of 538 electors within the Electoral College. The candidate who receives the majority of the 270 electoral votes wins, which is why 270 is considered the magic number. With only a few days left until Election Day, Clinton has the lead, but results from swing states are expected to be the decisive factor. So, who will head to the White House?
Election Day is less than a week away, next Tuesday to be precise. Polling booths will open in all 50 states and in Washington, D.C., and 120 million votes are expected to be cast. Now, my first question will be short. We'll start with you, Marcus. Who do you see as the 45th President of the United States?
I think it's going to be Hillary Clinton. The polls are pretty close if you look at some of the latest polls that are coming out. I still think that Hillary is gonna win. Hillary Clinton has a very long resume. She was the Secretary of State for 4 years. She used to be the Senator of New York for 8 years. She's lived in the White House. Not very many people can say that. She was married to a president, so she's one of the very few people in the world really who knows exactly what it means to be president, I think.
Right. Elise, what about you?
Well, there's a lot of science actually behind this. There's averages of polls, right? So the polls of polls. And those all show, and they're from various organizations and from universities, and those all show Clinton has anywhere between an 80 to greater than 90% chance of winning the election. And so, I follow the science. It looks like it's going to be a clear victory for her, especially in the Electoral College, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I picked Clinton as well to win. If you look at advanced polling of voters that have already, cast their ballots, she has something like a 14% advantage there, which ironically some media call a modest advantage. But I look at that when you factor in the Electoral College system, that's a landslide. So I think Clinton's going to take the election. It might be a little bit tighter than people think, but I still think Hillary Clinton will be the next American president.
I see. Before we proceed any further, let's go back to this election process in the United States. Elise, perhaps you could tell us a bit about the system which follows an electoral college.
That's right. So we don't do a direct election in which whoever wins the popular vote will just win. Instead, each state has a certain number of electors. Larger states with larger populations, for example, California has something like 55 electors. And so it's really a math game. It's about which states can I win and patch together to equal that number of points, essentially, electors. If you win a state just barely, only, 51% to 49%, you still get all of the electors of the state. So all those votes, the 49% of people, say in Florida, who vote for whoever the losing candidate is, those votes will not accrue to the total who wins that particular state.
Oh, I see. Does this system then well reflect the public sentiment, the public vote? Because you just mentioned, even in the case of Al Gore, was it in the year 2000, where he won the public mandate but did not secure the presidency?
Yes,
do you believe the system
Well, I think Al Gore, he won something like 500,000 more votes, but didn't secure the presidency. There's a lot of controversy about what went on in Florida that we could take up a show talking about that alone. But I think Elise pointed out, really what's happening now, I think, in the American presidential system with the Electoral College is that campaigns are gaming the system. They're sacrificing states and saying, we're not going to campaign in that state, we're not going to do any work trying to gain votes in that state, we're going to sacrifice that state, and we're going to concentrate on these other states. So, in a way, the use of the Electoral College kind of prevents the abuse of the minority by the majority using this type of system, but at the same time, it doesn't respect the majority as much as it could. But whatever system you choose, whether you choose a popular vote or an electoral college system or a proportional representation like they use here in South Korea, a little bit, you're going to have this sort of, it could be better if we did this, but then it would be worse. It's kind of a catch-22 situation.
I see. Elise, tell us a little bit about these swing states. It's a jargon we come across when we're talking about.
Sure. Well, Florida is an example. So it's one that swings between voting for a Republican candidate or voting for a Democratic presidential candidate, depending on the election year. North Carolina is another example. Ohio is actually trending far more Republican in recent cycles. But these are the states that aren't don't consistently tend to favor one candidate or another. Even states that have typically been Republican are now seeing a lot more support for Hillary Clinton. For example, Arizona hasn't been previously a swing state, but because of the high Hispanic population in Arizona and the fact that Donald Trump has turned off Latinos en masse, Arizona has become far more competitive. And so you're seeing trips by Michelle Obama and President Obama, who are surrogates for Hillary Clinton, in Arizona more often.
I see. Well, now, few can deny that the media plays a crucial role in offering undecided voters with essential information that may ultimately influence their final decision. Do you believe, Marcus, that it's appropriate for media organizations to endorse one particular candidate over the other? We've had, I think the New York Magazine, was it, in one of the more recent cases, where they branded Trump a loser on the cover of their election edition.
Right. I'm used to this kind of thing happening because I'm from Europe, where we traditionally have a political party press that would represent their views and that you would subscribe to if you also voted for that political party. So a very close connection between a political party and a newspaper traditionally. So this is not something that seems strange to me. I would rather that you know about these connections than than seeing what you sometimes see, that news organizations are covering one candidate more critically than another, even though they claim to be objective. So at least they come clean about where they stand, the newspapers.
What's it like for the Canadian press?
Well, the Canadian press does come out on their editorial pages and endorse candidates, but I don't think they would do it on the front page of a newspaper, and I think that's a good idea. I'm fine with that, as long as it doesn't affect their reporting, as long as they're not casting, more criticism on one candidate or controlling their journalists too much in their reporting, and that their reporting is reasonably objective and that their opinion is saved for the editorial pages. It's also important, I think most important, for the public to recognize that they're not going to get the truth from any single media organization, and it's best that they look at more than one media outlet to find the closest facsimile to the truth.
Right. Elise, what about your thoughts?
I feel the same way. I mean, news organizations in the United States have editorial pages. Those are separate from newsrooms, and so we have to delineate the difference. Editorial pages are there so that a board of 6 to 12 people can sort of put out their feelings about one thing or another. The reporters are largely kept on a different floor or in a different building from this sort of that particular team, so that the reporting of the truth doesn't get tainted.
Now, aside from the media, we have celebrities also voicing their support for certain candidates. So then, what are your thoughts on having these well-known personalities, including singers and actors, voicing their support for certain candidates?
Well, I think really it's part of a fallacy of authority or celebrity that somebody would trust somebody who's not an expert in that area. At the same time, I think it encourages civic participation, and I think that's very important that ordinary people participate in politics. The number of people that vote in the United States, I think, will be something like 120 million. There'll still be lots of people that would have been eligible voters that aren't voting. And any efforts that encourage more people to vote, I would absolutely support. And if I was a celebrity, I'd come out and endorse my candidate, but I think people should be careful in putting too much weight behind those endorsements.
So far, we've covered the atmosphere surrounding the presidential election in the US. In this next report, we explore the two candidates' campaign pledges.
Competition is as fierce as can be between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, with only a few days to go. With Election Day just around the corner, the approval ratings of the two candidates are neck and neck. Clinton's campaign has struggled with the email scandal during her time as Secretary of State, and concerns about her health also once surfaced. Trump's campaign has been plagued by controversial statements and allegations of sexual harassment. But a lot of eyes are also on their campaign pledges, not just their verbal campaign messages. A closer look at their pledges reveals the two contenders standing at polar opposites on many key issues. In terms of the economy, Clinton has pledged to create a wealth tax, also called the Buffett rule, to raise taxes on the rich. Trump has said he will cut corporate and income taxes and called for the repeal of estate tax, taking the opposite stance against Clinton. While Clinton is pushing for a more open policy with emphasis on strengthening ties with allies, Trump, in comparison, has taken a much stronger stance toward isolationism, pushing for closed-door policies on immigration and beefing up arguments against free trade. With candidates standing at opposite ends of the spectrum, much attention will be on which of these campaign promises have a stronger appeal to the American public.
We've just taken a look at some of the pledges made by Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Elise, among the issues, that of tax and immigrants appear to keep the two candidates far apart. Whose policy do you see as being more feasible?
What's getting lost in this election is a lot of policy matters in the first place, because this election has been largely driven by personality. Hillary Clinton does have some proposals whose details we haven't even gotten to see because we never talk about policy. But I would say that some of the very ideas that sort of drove Donald Trump to popularity are doable at all, nor would they be constitutional. I don't think it's realistic to extend a border wall across the entire border between the United States and Mexico. I also do not think it's feasible to ban an entire people of a religion from the country, a country that was based on religious freedom, founded on religious freedom.
I think it's a really populist sort of impulse that you also see in other elections, including in Canada. We call it America bashing, which candidates will do just in order to attract that sort of knee-jerk reaction and that knee-jerk impulse of people to say, oh, that person's really fighting for our country, when in fact they're just sort of using a populist impulse to get more attention and to get more support.
I see. Let's take a look at these candidates individually. Marcus, we'll start with Clinton then. In your opinion, Marcus, which of her policies, which of her campaign pledges do you see as being most important or interesting?
I think her proposal to try to close some of the loopholes that exist in gun background checking for gun control is interesting, because this is something it's always fascinating to Europeans, I think, to read about the gun culture in the gun ownership in the U.S. and it's something of a mystery, I think, to many people, why it seems to be so difficult to increase the gun control in the U.S., because it seems to be something that a lot of Democratic presidential candidates have pledged to do and have found it very difficult to do once they were in office. And so what Clinton is saying is she wants to make sure that everybody, as I understand it, needs to have a background check before they can own a weapon. And so she wants to close some of the loopholes that exist now. And that's going to be very interesting, I think, following how that's going to play out for her.
Well, I'm with Marcus on this. The issue of gun control is a little bit relevant to Canada, actually, because over the years we've seen an increase in gun violence in our cities, and it's kind of spillover from America's problem with this issue. And also, America's political culture influences the world. People look at the United States as an example.
Right. Elise, what about you? What strikes you most?
Well, the other thing that Europeans and Asians are always surprised about when they come to the United States is our crumbling infrastructure, airports, train stations, the trains. And Clinton has talked about this, but any measures that sort of devote more of the budget to trying to update our outdated infrastructure, I think are positive for the country and positive for commerce in general.
I see. Moving over to Trump then, which one of his proposed initiatives, Marcus, do you see as being, strikes you?
The ban on Muslims from entering the country, which we already talked about, is something that's it's interesting because it's a sentiment that's being voiced by a lot of politicians in Europe as well right now. And so it's a proposal that's being made in a lot of different ways. So what I think Trump is saying right now is that he doesn't mean to impose a ban on Muslims from entering the country, but a ban on people who are from countries that are associated with ISIS. So he's kind of softened it up a little bit.
I see. As an American, Elise, which one of Trump's pledges strikes you?
Well, yeah, we've already talked about this. I mean, anything that is xenophobic and racist is, I think, against the values of which this country, or my country, was sort of founded on.
Given Seoul's ties with Washington, there is no doubt much interest here in Korea regarding the outcome of the presidential race in the US. In this report, we have details regarding the two candidates' planned policies for the Korean peninsula.
How will the outcome of the US presidential election influence Korea? Already highlighted in many of their campaign pledges, Clinton and Trump hold different views on Korea-related policies. Most notable is their approach toward North Korea. To put an end to North Korea's nuclear program, Clinton has made it clear there will be no talks with Pyongyang without denuclearization. She's also said nuclear weapons will not be allowed on the Korean peninsula. On the other hand, Trump has expressed his willingness to speak with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and has hinted at the possibility of allowing nuclear armament by Seoul and Tokyo. Meanwhile, Trump is looking to collect additional defense costs from allies, while Clinton is focused on bolstering existing ties.
We defend Japan, we defend Germany, we defend South Korea, we defend Saudi Arabia, we defend countries. They do not pay us.
And I want to reassure our allies in Japan and South Korea and elsewhere that we have mutual defense treaties and we will honor them.
Korea and the United States have shared a long history as allies, which is why changes, big and small, are expected depending on the outcome of the race for the White House.
Right. Frank, earlier you mentioned your opposition to Clinton's planned policies in dealing with North Korea. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. Just a couple of weeks ago, advisor to Clinton named Michelle Flournoy visited South Korea. She's the CEO of the Project for the New American Century. It's a neoconservative think tank in the United States, and she's advocates a stronger sanctions and stronger pressure on North Korea, stronger pressure on China, sanctioning Chinese entities involved in trade with North Korea. My view is that that's going to exacerbate tension on the Korean Peninsula and move us further away from negotiations and further away from a solution to this problem that we have here on the Korean Peninsula that really, I feel, can only be solved through negotiations.
What about you, Marcus? Whose policies, Trump's or Clinton's, do you see as being more feasible for the Korean Peninsula to ensure security stability here?
Well, I'd agree with Frank. I think and I'd have to go with Hillary Clinton. But you also have to remember that she's had difficulties in dealing with North Korea before as Secretary of State, and a lot of people in the U.S. remember this. So shortly after she took over as Secretary of State, Pyongyang did a nuclear test, and they did another one in 2013, a few months after she left office. So she's had to deal a lot with the North Korea in the past, and a lot of people would say that she hasn't been very successful in doing that. So I'd have my reservations about Hillary Clinton as well.
I see. What about you, Elise?
I'm actually not sure what Donald Trump's policy on the Korean Peninsula is. He has simultaneously said that he would be happy to have a cheeseburger with Kim Jong-un, and then also indicated that he would be happy to abandon his commitments to the alliance, including South Korea and Japan. And hasn't been completely clear on whether he'd be in favor of preemptive nuclear strike. Again, to something we talked about earlier, Hillary Clinton hasn't been very detailed on a lot of her, and hasn't had a chance, frankly, to be very detailed when it comes to policy matters. So we don't know what specifics she's thinking in resolving the North Korea question, or at least sort of getting back to the table either.
Earlier in June, a North Korean media outlet voiced support for Trump, claiming that he was a character of sound judgment with far-sighted policies. What do you suppose is the reason behind the show of support, Marcus?
Well, because he says he wants to do exactly what Pyongyang is hoping for, right? He said that he wants to withdraw U.S. troops from South Korea. So that's that's two things that Pyongyang has been trying to get to for many years. So that's a good reason why they would support him, I think.
Frank, a U.S. administration under whose rule do you suppose would be more beneficial for the Korean government?
For the South Korean government?
Yes, the South Korean government.
I'm going to have to say still Hillary Clinton. She'll definitely uphold the trade agreement here. She'll maintain the alliance with South Korea. I do believe, and I would like to see a shift in U.S. policy toward North Korea. A lot of analysts, both here and in Washington, have come out suggesting that the U.S. needs to talk to North Korea. But again, those talks will come with a price, as many people have said.
I see. Well, early voting has already begun, and in less than a week, Americans will welcome a new tenant at the White House. We pray that the new president will place priority on his people and on the peace of the globe. Now, before we end this edition of Foreign Correspondents, as always, let's have a few words on your thoughts regarding today's discussion. Frank, we'll start with you.
Well, while I have reservations, as I've mentioned, with Hillary Clinton, I think she'll probably make a better president than Donald Trump should she come through here on November 8th. But still, you know, as Marcus mentioned, the polls are narrowing, so we'll have to see what happens over the next week.
I, like so many other Americans and people around the world, just want this election to be over. It's been nasty, vitriolic, a lot of sort of drama that I have felt is unnecessary. So I think it'll be a huge relief to a lot of us that something is decided. However, the path ahead, given the very polarized electorate, is going to be very difficult for whoever gets elected, because governance, which is something that all democracies need, could be paralyzed.
I'd have to agree with Elise. I think it's been a very ugly, a very divisive presidential campaign, and it's going to be good to have that behind us, because there's a lot of important issues to be dealt with in the world.
Right, and thank you for those thoughts. The best way to predict the future is to invent it. These words by Alan Curtis Kay, an American computer scientist, may be seen as calling on Americans to take part in inventing their future, as the outcome of next week's presidential race will offer them, as well as many around the world, with a predictable picture of America's prospects. Thank you for watching.